Thank you very much. Thank you for that kind introduction. And I just want to say how pleased I am to be sharing a platform with such brilliant campaigners who are all of them standing up for workers' rights, who are all of them there in solidarity against these devastating cuts. And I just wanted to follow on from the students as well by paying tribute to the students and the staff at the University of Sussex, in my own constituency, where they are facing job cuts. 112 jobs are going, and the students have been fantastic with sit-ins and all kinds of occupations there as well. But I just wanted to reflect a little bit on the national level and a little bit from the perspective that I've been seeing, the rather strange perspective, I have to say, from the last few days, from inside that very strange place by the river. And three words keep getting repeated in that house, and those words are freedom, fairness, and responsibility. Now, those words sound so nice. Who could possibly be against freedom, fairness, and responsibility? And yet you will know that that is the mantra that is coming from our new, delightful coalition government. And they will try to persuade you that freedom, fairness, and responsibility can be achieved, first of all, by £6 billion of swinging cuts to public services, followed by many, many more billions down the road. And I think it's incredibly important that we tell them that this is not the way to achieve freedom, fairness, or responsibility. The truth is, of course, that the government's cuts programme will lead to much greater unfairness. It will exacerbate inequality, and it will do nothing to build the strong and thriving public sector that we so desperately need. And it is an obscenity that it is the poorest people who are being made to pay with their livelihoods, with their jobs, with their hopes, with their aspirations for the recklessness of the richest, in other words, the bankers and their bonuses. And yes, we only have to look to Greece to see the stark reality of what happens if we stand by and let reducing the deficit and restoring economic growth be, as the Queen told us yesterday, her government's first priority. Well, we think surely its first priority should be to recognise that alongside an economic crisis, there is also a social crisis which will be exacerbated by the way they intend to address it, and there is also an environmental crisis, and those three things are interlinked. Now, the Treasury has made much of its plans to publish line by line how much each government department spends and how much each government department saves, all in the name of transparency. Well, that's all very well and good, but what I would like to know is where is the openness and transparency about how many jobs will be lost as a result of this first cut of round? Where's the transparency about the impact on families who will lose their main breadwinner when they're made redundant? Where's the transparency in measuring the likely impact of further cuts when it comes to indicators like child poverty or young people's aspirations? And while we're at it, what about the transparency for all those private companies that will soon be running our schools or overseeing our welfare system or delivering our mail? Now, as the IMF and the EU together agreed their austerity measures and the stability pacts to so-called save Greece, I'm sure that the impact on families, on workers, on jobs didn't even feature on their agenda. Instead, they would have been dominated by an abstract set of zeros on a spreadsheet. But I think we're here to say that those zeros are actually real people's wages. Those zeros on the spreadsheet are actually real people's livelihoods. It's their hopes, their aspirations, and we will fight for them against these hugely damaging cuts. And so I'm really proud to be here this evening in solidarity with the people of Greece and joining with them and the movement here in the UK, including all of the fantastic work that's being done by the unions, fighting against public sector cuts, fighting against low wages and the privatisation of public services. But being part of that fight for fairness, I think, means looking at how we've arrived at where we are at today, with rising unemployment, rising home repossessions, dwindling wage levels, dwindling aspirations, an unequal society that is getting more unfair. And I think the crucial thing to recognise is that all of this hasn't happened by accident. It is a direct and inevitable result of the kind of financial deregulation overseen first of all by Thatcher, but then by Blair and Brown, and now being carried on by Cameron and Clegg. And I think we need to be really clear that it is precisely business as usual that has created this crisis, and so the idea that we need to get back to business as usual as quickly as possible is deeply, deeply worrying. What we need is a model that is genuinely fair and sustainable, a model based on a steady state economy, rather than chasing ever more economic growth for its own sake, and a model that is genuinely based on equality. And it seems to me that one of the most important things we can do is to make the case in every possible forum that these cuts are not inevitable. I have been amazed at the way in which every single public organ seems to be trying to tell us that there is no alternative. All of the mainstream media, all of the bigger parties, all saying there's nothing we can do, it has to happen, it's like gravity. And I think we need to go back to them and say time and again that these cuts are a result of political choices, and we can change those political choices. They're not inevitable. There are two ways, at least, of addressing the deficit. And one, yes, is through swinging cuts to public spending and public services. But the other is another package of measures, which includes that very dangerous word taxation. But it does include actually trying to make this country more equal, which would mean higher taxation on people who actually earn an awful lot more. You know, we are in a situation today where those on the highest incomes pay least as a proportion of their income on tax. They pay far less than the poorest in this society today. We have a society now that is more unequal than at any time since just after the Second World War. A society that after 13 years of a Labour government is more unequal today than it was when they came to power. So I think we need to be talking about progressive taxation. I think we ought to be talking as well about clamping down on tax havens and collecting unpaid tax, which could generate about £13 billion in just 1 year. Now, why isn't the government doing things like that? Why aren't they looking at things like the Robin Hood tax? You know, Gordon Brown had a wonderful opportunity to introduce that, even unilaterally, in the last budget, and he didn't do it. These are the ambitious measures, progressive measures, obvious measures that could really make a difference when it comes to addressing this crisis, and I think it's a real tragedy that it's not being done. I can't see him, but I'm sure he's about to wind me up, so let me just say a few last things. One is I wanted to say that I think we can learn a lot from Greece when it comes to working together, making coalitions together so that we don't allow people to divide and rule. You know, Paul spoke really movingly about making sure that we see this not just as a problem in the UK, not even just a problem in Europe, but wider than that, about sticking together. And I was at a meeting like this in Brighton last night, which was packed as well. And one of the workers there worked in mental health, and he made a really important point, I think. He said this culture of divide and rule is everywhere, and they will try to tell you, for example, that they want to protect frontline services, and that somehow is going to be okay. And what the point he made was that frontline services aren't just somehow free-floating, completely separate from all of the support staff that make the frontline service delivery possible. And this idea of saying we're going to protect frontline services is again just another example of dividing and ruling. And I think we have to be here tonight to say we will not be divided and ruled. We will stick together. David Cameron likes to talk about big society, people power. Well, I think we should come here tonight and show what real people power looks like.